I want to make sure that we're getting to the first poll question that I think will fit nicely into what we've just discussed here. We asked the audience if they're interested in allogeneic or autologous manufacturing innovations, and here's how they responded. So for autologous, we're about 19%, allogeneic, about 21%, and both about 59%. And so just even based on what you've just been discussing from the challenges perspective, do you see this as fitting right in line with where we are in the sector today or where you are with your role in your company? Ludek, how about you?
You mean?
Yeah, well, so you said 80% allogenic and 20% autologous. So then probably not, because I'm purely in autologous space, and I think that there is of course space in different indication to get different products on the market, and we believe that this is the right way, of course, to invest to and to get it to the patients. But of course, nothing against my colleagues focusing on allogenic products. There are already some clinically tested. Thomas can speak about it as well, probably. But I believe really in autologous because I'm in that field quite some time already.
Sure. Okay. I want to move on a little bit here. I want to talk about solutions to the near-term solutions for each of the challenges we discussed. Mark, let's start with you. What are some actual near-term solutions to any of the manufacturing challenges we talked about earlier?
So I think we've covered some of these, so it'll sound a little bit redundant, but I'm going to then turn it over a little bit to Ludek, because I think there's a part here we haven't quite covered. So I mentioned already that one is really thinking about trying to move from the single lot to multiple lots, like Thomas was talking about. That really requires us to bring in allogeneic cell sources or cell line sources within that. But the big piece for me is the scaling that I think there's a lot of technology that's being applied to this right now. And Thomas was talking about, and it depends which side of your equation you're on. If you're on the allogeneic side, as Thomas, I think, was saying, is you're wanting to get large, whatever we want to call master cell banks, working cell banks, whatever they may be, in order to produce that at scale. But I'd be interested in Ludek's thoughts on this, that what I'm seeing on the autologous side, because I'm going to split between both of these cell platforms of allo and auto. On the auto side, it's actually trying to control, if you will, not just incrementally, but control your consumables and get down to scale, lower volumes, lower media utilization, different things like that, which is really an engineering challenge as well as a biological challenge. But I'd be very interested to hear more from Ludek on that concept, because there are technologies that are out there that I think are very promising in trying to scale down with different systems overall. But Ludek, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, again, it's difficult to generalize because different products have different needs. But I strongly suggest to find the good partner focusing on the automation, on the development of such devices. But of course, before you do anything like that, it's logical, it's obvious that there is a need to evaluate already the products that are on the market, right? So there are different products that are allowing these very efficient culturing of cells. So we did it always the way that we evaluated those products first, those devices first, and then we potentially worked with the partner focusing on the automation to put it together with different devices or to develop something more specific for the product. So it's really, for me, it's difficult to generalize that. I don't want to advertise here those solutions, but you see it's every conferences. I think there are many solutions that are that is possible to use.
We have a good question that came in from the audience that I think might be great to put in here. A question was asked that everyone talks about the economies of scale with allo, but what are the additional costs or considerations in manufacturing for allo that auto doesn't face? What do you guys think about that?
I'll start out, but obviously Thomas should comment on this more because he focuses in the area of allo. But I think, Aaron, the thing I've been struck by most in the allo space when we're talking about alpha beta T cell allogeneic therapies is the fact that there's, at least up to this time, we believe we need to do a fair amount of genetic engineering, genetic editing in order to make those as viable products. The allogeneic setting certainly allows for using more complex genetic editing, but that comes with an offset on cost. So I get my scale, but there are both technical and regulatory challenges that come for those products. And again, Thomas can probably speak to this better than I, that auto cells, for the most part, don't face, because in essence, anything you don't genetically modify is just you're giving back the patient's own cells. So there's not a question of a lot of the excipients within the cell product as well. I do think that the interesting area that's coming up in cell therapy right now, at least immune cell therapy, is the use of more of the innate populations, the NK cells or the NK-like gamma delta T cells or gamma delta T cells generally, as they don't seem to face the same immunological barriers in using for allogeneic therapy. And as such, that they may actually provide a not only just theoretical, but a real advance forward where we don't have to take on the cost of doing all that gene editing. And I think that may be a path forward where allogeneic will find a significant savings in cost and regulatory costs challenges afterwards. But I'll let Thomas speak to the allo than I.
I was just going to say, Thomas, tell us your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so regarding the economy of scales, I'm pretty sure that when more patients will be treated with cell therapy, both auto and allo, they will benefit from the economy of scale, because as I mentioned, really, the raw material suppliers, they will invest in the manufacturing process, and they could reduce the cost, because a lot of raw materials are really similar between allo and auto. But really, when we compare allo and auto, per patient, we can expect to use less raw materials for allogenic therapies, because in autologous therapies, I remind you that one batch is for one patient. So even if you produce several billion cells, maybe only 100 million cells will be useful, and everything else will be discarded. But in allogenic therapies, all the cells produced could be used for patients. So I would say that for the same quantity of raw material used, it will be better in allogenic.
Yeah, autologous, speaking about raw materials, I see huge differences, of course, in case you negotiate the price for your raw materials, like for a 1-year project, if compared with something, let's say, within next 3 years. If you have certain clinical development plan and plan for clinical trials that you need to support with your product to be manufactured within your facility, there is a huge difference in a price if you negotiate with those suppliers of raw materials for this, let's say, 3 years view and certain volumes that are expected then to be purchased. There are really huge differences, so it's always about your ability to negotiate better price, but always to work within the company or as clear as possible plan for, let's say, next 2 or 3 years within certain indications and certain product to get as good price as possible. Yeah.
Ludek, do you think in the autologous setting, I'm just thinking about it in comparison to allogeneic, because we always give the economy of scale to allogeneic, but can we make either multiple incremental steps or real disruptive steps in improving COGS in the autologous setting from your point of view?
I think it's dependent on the size of the company, number of projects really, because as I said, the volumes are incredibly influencing the price of your raw materials used in the manufacturing process. So if you are smaller company with 2 or 3 clinical projects manufacturing only, let's say 30, 40 batches per year, it's totally different story than if you are running 3 larger scale clinical trials. And then of course, if the manufacturing process is similar, usage of raw materials is similar, and you have much more wider space to negotiate better price. So this is what I see really obvious. It's logical. It's obvious. So I think that there is space to get to reasonable price of raw materials in case these capacities are higher. Yeah.